And I'm going to talk to you from my perspective as a young unmarried person, and also from my clinical experience. So I have four main points that I'm wanting to get across to you, and they're really about being a single person and navigating some of the dating fields, dating issues that people experience. So my first point is to focus on yourself. I think it's really easy to focus on what's wrong with the people that we're in relationship with and to lose sight of our role in relationship issues. So we've heard about the statistics. It's really, I think, very easy, especially for women, to get into venting sessions where we're complaining about men, complaining about lack of men, complaining about men being horrible or other women being horrible. And that's not to say that those things are never true, but we can get so caught up in that that we forget that we are also playing a role. We are part of the relationships that we engage in. And so it's important to remember what you can do. And I also think this is an empowering role. It's very disempowering to feel like, well, there are no men, all men are horrible, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's really empowering to feel as though you can do something for yourself to grow, to be a better partner to someone and a better person. So the two things I would encourage you to focus on when you're focusing on yourself are, first of all, your healing. Often we experience pain when we break up. When a relationship ends, it can be very hard and very painful. And sometimes we can be tempted to jump right into another relationship. And that can be very detrimental because we need to allow ourselves time to process and really heal and understand what went wrong in that relationship before we can be ready to start another one. The second thing I would encourage you to do is to focus on your growth. Identify areas where you can grow personally. This could mean strengthening your ability to show empathy to others and to yourself. It could mean learning to manage your anger. It could be developing relationships with friends, family, God, or a higher power if you believe in one. The second central point I have for you is to manage your anxiety. I know when I was listening to Reggie, my anxiety started to rise. Like, oh my goodness, 43, 100, right? It's kind of scary to think we're in this bad numbers game, right? We're in a numbers game that's really not for the benefit of Black women. And so it can be easy when you feel anxious to make poor relationship decisions because you're scared, right? To stay in a relationship that you really shouldn't be in, to start a relationship that you shouldn't be in, to allow someone to disrespect you in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. And so it's important to be mindful of how you're making decisions, right? We don't want to make decisions out of fear. You don't want to start a relationship with someone because you're scared there's not going to be anyone else around. So don't let that cloud your vision. Don't let that cloud what you want, because at the end of the day, what we really want is healthy relationships. One of the things I've learned from being in Bible studies and other settings with people who have been married and people who have been married and divorced is that it is not a good idea to be in a bad marriage, right? That's another thing I've learned. I'm a couples therapist now, and so hearing about the struggles that couples go through, I really am very clear about the fact that being single is preferable to being in a bad, conflictual marriage. And I think as a single person, it's easy to lose sight of that. My third main point and encouragement to you is to be open. One of the things that anxiety does is that it makes us want to withdraw and protect ourselves. It can also make us want to lash out to protect ourselves. Essentially, it keeps us from wanting to be vulnerable. One of the things that I think hinders African American relationships is the difficulties that both men and women have with being open and vulnerable with each other. When we've been hurt in relationships before, it can be very difficult to be vulnerable in a next relationship. And yet, vulnerability is a necessary ingredient for true intimacy. So if you're having trouble being open when you meet a potential date or start dating someone, I really encourage you to take some time to consider what's getting in your way. It's important to remember that we often get what we expect. So if we expect someone will treat us poorly, that may become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Dr. Reggie mentioned, how institutionalized racism gets caught up in Black relationships. So if you're believing that all Black men are horrible, or if you're believing all Black women are, angry and too independent, that can get caught up in your relationship. And it's really important to take a step back, look at your assumptions, right? Are you assuming this person's gonna treat you poorly? If that assumption is based on evidence, then maybe you don't need to be in that relationship. If it's not based on this person, if it's based on a past relationship, then you gotta figure out how to work through that so it doesn't ruin a current or potential relationship. And my last point for you guys is that I want to encourage you to establish healthy boundaries. Boundaries are essential for being an emotionally healthy and grounded single person and for having healthy relationships. It can be really easy, I think, in the current culture to move in and out of relationships without clear boundaries. And this often leads to messy relationships. I really encourage you to identify your personal boundaries prior to entering a relationship, right? So once you start dating someone or engaging with someone in any sort of way, it's hard to then go back and say, well, I want this to be a boundary now. And so it's important to know going into situations what's important to you. Where do you draw the line? And then once a relationship ends, you need to reestablish boundaries, right? So often people want to continue being best friends with somebody that they were just sleeping with or somebody they were in a relationship with. And this is an unrealistic expectation typically, right? You need time to change the nature of the relationship. You might be able to be friends later, but don't expect that you can kind of just continue and that things will be okay and that you'll be ready to go into another relationship. The other thing I would encourage you to do is not settle for a relationship arrangement, so for example, lack of commitment, that does not fit within your boundaries. So if you want to be in a committed relationship, it's not a good idea to settle for friends with benefits relationship because that's not really what you want. It's usually going to end up in pain and hurt. Those things rarely work out so that you get married magically one day. So those are my points to you, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions.